All right. Don't worry, you're not listening to the wrong podcast. This is Millennial in the Middle. I'm Connor Dehlin. A different song to start off today, and I'm going to tie it into today's episode. And I'm going to give you a little teaser, because I don't talk about this until the end of the interview. But that's Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. You know, I'm always tying things into music, especially when it comes to oldies. And that song, Oh What a Night, late December back in 63. I tie it in tonight because I want to use it to help you remember the date of the history that I'm going to talk about tonight. That song's about losing your virginity. That's not what we're talking about. Yeah, go listen to the words of that song. That little catchy tune will be a little different to you when you realize it's a young guy talking about his first time. But anyway, Oh What a Night, late December back in 1773. We're going to talk about an event that happened December 1773 and tie it to a current event that's happening literally right now. Now, this episode is really cool. I bring Erik Little on. We have an awesome conversation. Erik is the owner and founder of a company called The Tribe. It's an events company in Utah. And he obviously, like so many businesses that have just been rocked by this pandemic and COVID-19 this year, when you run a business that is all about hosting large gatherings of people, you can imagine that's not the greatest business to be in a year where large gatherings are like literally illegal. He's had over 15 events canceled, both corporate and private, and he decided to throw an event that he called The Protest on Halloween. Now, I talk about all this in our interview. You'll hear it in just a minute. But what he does here is kind of brilliant, is he says basically on Halloween night, we're going to throw the biggest party of the year in Utah, living by all of social distancing, mask, all of the CDC guidelines and rules, but we're going to host an outdoor gathering of people, and we're going to protest the ability for us to gather, especially the youth, Millennials and Gen Z that have isolated this year. And with isolation, all the different problems with anxiety and depression that have come up, they said, look, we're going to host an event that's basically bringing us together, bringing people together. And they threw that out there, and oh man, he got attacked from the media, from the government, from officials, health officials throughout the state, from every side. And this story is pretty fascinating. And what's so cool about it is it's happening like live. He gets an update about this event literally a half hour before we record the interview. This is recorded on Monday night, the week of Halloween, and hopefully you enjoy this. Thanks to Erik for coming on the show. Not only is he a great small business owner, but he knows his stuff when it comes to history, when it comes to politics. I think you'll enjoy listening to this. Have a good one. All right, Erik Little, you have had, I know, a pretty eventful day and a pretty eventful last few weeks, and I am so excited to have you on the podcast to talk a little about it. Thanks for joining.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, and it's actually been a very uneventful year, even though you said it was an eventful last 2 weeks. Technically.
I didn't even mean for that play on words, but it just came out. That's what you do. You're in the business of events, right?
Yep.
Okay, tell me a little about your business, and then obviously, you host large gatherings, which are illegal in 2020. What's that been like?
Yeah, it's been actually very difficult. So I co-founded a business called The Tribe with my buddy Tanner Valerio, and we've been doing it for over 4 years. And our biggest thing is just bringing people together. And we do that for families. We do that for college students. That's kind of our bread and butter. Mm-hmm. And we've also done it for a lot of corporate events too. But with this whole COVID-19 situation, it's been almost impossible to do what we did in 2019.
Yeah.
We're kind of at the bottom of the food chain, to be honest.
Sure. And you're the definition of a small business, right? Small business owner that has this event business. 2019 was your best year ever.
Yeah, it was good.
And all of a sudden 2020 comes. Tell me about the initial reaction of COVID starting. We head into quarantine. What was that like for you trying to figure this out on the fly?
Well, at first, I was kind of in the same boat as everybody else. And like for the 14 days or 15 days or whatever it was to slow the spread, I was like, yeah, we don't want these hospitals overrun. Let's pause everything for a sec. And, in just 14 days isn't going to destroy an economy. And I was actually okay with it. And I actually remember listening to a podcast where somebody was saying, this is so bad that we're shutting things down because it's going to turn into this, and this. And I was like, what? That's way out there. There's no way. And it's all come true.
Conspiracy, right?
Yeah, but it's all come true since he said that, and it just blew my mind.
So let's talk about that. Obviously, we get through this. I saw a meme a little while back. Actually, you might have been the one that posted it. Made me laugh. Where it said, "Happy 6-month anniversary to 15 days to slow the curve." And I'm like, man, here we were so much in that mentality of, hey, let's do this right now. Let's make sure these hospitals don't boom. And 7 months later, we're at the end of October. And so you decide you want to throw what would be the biggest party of 2020 in Utah, and heck, who knows, maybe in the Western United States or the country. Tell me a little bit about the protest on Halloween.
Yeah, so it's kind of a touchy subject for a lot of people. There's a lot of people that are very opinionated about it on both sides. Yeah. And it's so sad that it's become such a political issue. Why is it so left and right? That doesn't make any sense to me. I think it should be just common sense. Mm-hmm. But the big thing is, the protest isn't protesting the reality of COVID-19. It's a totally different protest than that. It's more just standing up for our rights to be able to gather together in a way that's really not going to negatively impact people's health. And again, that's my opinion. But, we're catering to an age group that's in the 18 to 25 range. And when they get COVID, it's basically a cold. And they get over it, they go back to their daily life, and so, it hits some worse than others, but none of them die. Literally none of them die. Yeah. And, I could get misquoted on that because, there's all these comorbidities and everything else. But when we take that into account, it's just not quite as big of an issue as a lot of people are making it seem. And our thing is, the domestic abuse has gone up, and other mental problems I've noticed has gone up. And specifically, though, I had a meeting with Provo City Fire and Provo Police. Okay. And I don't know if I'm technically supposed to make this like public knowledge, but they turned to me and they were like, hey, we need you guys to host events. Do everything you can to host events because we're seeing the mental side of things. And we're seeing all these issues that these younger people, the 18 to 25-year-olds in college, and even the ones that aren't in college, are just struggling right now. And we're kind of created this cure that isolated everybody and drove them all apart, and it took away a very important element to happiness, I believe, in people our age.
Well, and here's a millennial mindset, right? Like this podcast is Millennial in the Middle. I'm 28 years old. We're about the same age. And what most people think is, we read the news about what should happen to a family in quarantine, right? That the family should stay together. Well, it's been amazing to see different friends that I've had over the last 6 months. They don't live with family members. They live with roommates. They live with other singles. And then all of a sudden, the tension that's created like within a home where one person may be very strictly quarantining, but they've got 2 roommates that are off partying and having weekend trips and whatever it might be. And I mean, I've seen friendships literally torn apart and broken just because of people looking at this different. I mean, how do you think this whole mindset has affected the millennial generation and Gen Z more than anyone else?
Oh, that honestly, you bring up such a good point. And I think I mean, at the very beginning, one of my roommates was one of those very, very strict individuals because he has a sister that was deemed early on as high risk, which now she's cleared from being high risk because we know more about the virus. Yeah. But I've seen it affect people's relationships big time. Yeah. On a personal note, I've seen people around me, friend groups have almost, it seems like, and I'm not like a scientist and I haven't run a bunch of numbers and done a bunch of research, but generally speaking, people are a little bit more high strung. They're a little bit more stressed out. And I think I could even draw a correlation to a lot of these riots and other problems we're seeing in the country to the lockdown concept and the isolation. Yeah. And I think the millennials and the Generation Z, those age groups are definitely the ones that are affected the most by it.
Yeah. Well, and then it's interesting. You've got a 25-year-old that all of a sudden Mom and Dad don't want him to come home.
I know, that was...
They don't know who you've been with.
Seriously, right? I missed my dad's birthday because they're so concerned about the virus. And I mean, my whole friend group's had it. I had it. At least I think I've had it, but I didn't go get tested because I didn't want to just add to their stupid numbers. Yeah. That's a very controversial thing for me to say.
Hey, I feel
but maybe I should have gotten tested so that I could tell my family I'm immune now. But, even with the news, a lot of people are believing that's not even true.
Sure. So let's go back to this event. So you kind of tongue-in-cheek call it the protest.
Yeah.
Obviously giving this feel of like we've had all these protests all summer long that the news is celebrating and politicians are going out and joining and they're outside. And so you kind of take this same little angle. Tell the audience a little bit about what your website read about this party.
Okay, so it kind of just highlights the hypocrisy. And I knew it was going to get to this.
Yeah.
I just didn't know it was going to be as big of a war as it ended up being. But I knew it was going to get a lot of hate and it was going to cause some people to think, wait, if, all summer long there were Black Lives Matter protests and there were all kinds of different gatherings and masks weren't even a thing at these gatherings and the media never even reported anything to do with COVID at any one of them. And I'm not saying that, I'm not taking a side on these protests at all, but I'm over here as an event planner and I see the good that it brings people when they come together. And I'm like, what's the difference? There really isn't one.
Sure.
And so in my mind, it's like if you gather people together for a purpose and you call it a protest, it's a protest and there's no difference. So that's what I did. And the big thing is we have a constitutional right to assemble. And it doesn't say what you assemble for. You could assemble for pro-life or pro-abortion, or you could assemble for Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street. Well, we're assembling because we think it is the right thing to do to remain healthy mentally as millennials by getting together and enjoying each other's company.
So one of the things I think you did that was brilliant is on your website, you made it very clear. You spelled everything out. First off, you said, hey, if you come to this event, you're accepting the inherent risks, right? Like you could get it and we're not responsible for that. And this is something, there will be people there. And then actually on your website as well, you said this will be a massive outdoor costume party, in parentheses protest, being held on private property for the purpose of promoting mental health and to raise a voice against those who are using fear and misleading information to gain power and control our lives. Life must go on. COVID-19 is real, but it shouldn't be the end of normalcy.
Yep, that's it in a nutshell.
What's so funny is that's not your typical invitation to a Halloween party. Man, what a crazy 2020 where
it's insane.
All of a sudden that's part of the conversation. And then you had to do something different where you knew there was going to be backlash. So we can actually say this now and we'll talk about it. You said, okay, my company, The Tribe, can't run this.
Correct.
Because I can't put my business at risk. So you start a new one.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I was sitting there with my business partner and we're like, we can't lose all of our corporate events next year because if we make it in the news and we're going to get just completely hounded by a lot of these companies that may see things a little differently than how we do, and we like to stay neutral in a business setting.
Sure.
And it stinks that what we do for business has become so controversial. It's the same. And you look at 2019, look at Halloween parties. If someone brought a mask, they got kicked out. They weren't allowed in with the mask.
Oh my gosh.
And now it's
so funny.
Now it's like you can't come unless you have a mat. And it's mind blowing. It's honestly mind blowing to me. But I don't know where I was going with that.
I love it. So you're right. You do get the news, right? I've seen articles now on KSL, Fox 13, Channel 2. You're making the local news, Deseret.
Yeah.
It was something, one of the articles, this is the article from Fox 13, they actually quoted Governor Herbert, so you got his attention on this.
Yeah.
We call upon all Utahns to be responsible and abide by state and country rules and guidelines for gatherings. An event such as this one is impermissible under the current rules.
Yeah.
We expect local authorities to vigorously enforce flagrant violations of health orders. That's Governor Herbert talking about you.
And the thing is, his statement is completely false because we're able to comply to all of his guidelines.
So did you try?
Well, we can get into that in a sec, but the thing about Governor Herbert though is he was caught going to social gatherings where people in the high risk category were not wearing masks and they were all super close together. And he comes out just days later and kind of throws this stuff out there like, we're going to come and enforce this to the highest extent of the law. And it's, people aren't buying it. They're really not. The people are starting to wake up. And the thing is, like, the more people that come back with a positive test, I've noticed, the stronger the force to wake up and just get back to normal in a responsible way becomes.
Sure. Well, look how it's energized Donald Trump.
Yeah,
Donald
he got
Trump
it.
has more energy out on the campaign trail right now than he has all year. And I think it's that. Something we've had such fear about. Well, he's back. And now what is he out there doing? We're going to dominate this virus. Don't fear it. We'll learn to live with it.
Yeah, well, and you see the like back to the 18 to 25-year-olds, it's like a roommate gets it. Everyone freaks out. Everybody shuts down. They quarantine for 14 days. After 3 days, they're fine. They're bored. What are we doing? That's what happened. It's going on in everybody's heads. And the higher these cases go up in that age group, the stronger the opinions are going to be that this isn't quite what they sold us on. It isn't quite what they sold us on, even though it is a real issue and it's very sad and a lot of people have died from it.
So you said, hey, we're going to live by the guidelines.
Yes.
And like, you weren't hosting this of we're going to have masks off just to stick it to the man.
Nope. Masks are required for entry.
Okay.
Right? Now, there is an interesting dilemma, though. So our type of event inherently is not social distance friendly, right?
A party, a mosh pit. Being a mosh pit, that's not socially distanced.
And the mosh pit isn't encouraged. It kind of just naturally happens. Like when people come close together and they like to dance near each other. But the thing is, there is a difference between the organizer's responsibility and the individual's responsibility.
Yeah.
And so our thing was, according to the guidelines, which are actually pretty reasonable to follow, all we had to do was require a mask for every single person that entered, make sure it's posted so people know that they should wear a mask, and provide enough space and signage for 6-foot social distancing between household groups. Now, there is an individual part where they have to actually choose to do that.
Yeah.
And that's where, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't going to succeed in enforcing. And that's where I think Governor Herbert, his thing is, there's no way they can do it. Well, the event organizers can do it effectively. But the guests, not necessarily. I mean, if you show up at a haunted house, the event organizers can do everything they want to do. They can to make you wear a mask, but if you take it off while you're going through the haunted house and nobody sees you, they shouldn't be responsible for that. Sure. They shouldn't be liable for that.
Well, it's something as simple as you go into Chipotle. Chipotle has put the little stickers on the floor of stand in line here. But what happens if I don't do that? What happens if I go stand right next to the person? Chipotle can try all they want. Yep. But at the end of the day, where does the responsibility lie with the business or the individual to go around being the mask police or enforcing this 6-foot distance? Yep,
that's a great point you bring up. Now one thing that I want to ensure is I tend not to wear masks in places where people are expected to wear masks, but if I'm on private property and they tell me I need to wear a mask, I'll wear it. Because I think that a private business has the right to kick somebody out who isn't following their rules. It's like no shirt, no shoes, no service. Yeah. But when the government gets involved and requires certain things in a way that it wasn't legislated through the proper channel, through the proper branch of government, then it is unconstitutional. And there are a lot of government entities, especially governors and mayors and health departments, who have taken on their own shoulders the right to dictate exactly what people can and cannot. It's what happened to My Body, My Choice, right?
Sure.
Like, honestly, I mean, all the people that are saying like, we should be all in favor of abortion, I'm not going to bring up that argument here at all.
It's okay. We did it a couple episodes ago.
Okay. But it's like, what's the difference? My body, my choice. Well, if I don't wear a mask, the risk is you could affect somebody else that's out there. Well, when you have an abortion, you're affecting another life too. Like, yeah, I don't get the logic. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, I've jokingly said to people, it's so easy to walk outside and just point out the inconsistencies.
Oh, they're everywhere. Like, my goodness.
I've told people jokingly, hey, it's a lot easier to get through 2020 if you suspend critical thinking. If you just don't think common sense and just do as you're told.
Emotions.
But there's danger in that. What happens when a community and a society stops asking questions, stops thinking for themselves? And now, so you create a new business. Mm-hmm. You decide, all right, we're going to have Utah Tonight. is this new business. Now, as of a day ago, you had no relation to Utah Tonight, but now we can come out and say that was you. Shocker. You tell me about the reaction and kind of the pressure that you receive from the powers that be in the media.
Oh my. Okay. Well, there is an important thing to bring up here. There is a group of two individuals who run a small business called Young and Dumb.
Okay.
I actually know them really well. They're good friends. I like them. But their business is so different from ours. Like, we've been in it for a lot longer. I'm not saying we're any better than them. We just offer a completely different product, a completely different service because we've been in the corporate world. So we've done, like, we understand, like, requirements when it comes to fire code. We understand, like, mass gatherings and how many toilets you need per number of guests and things like that. And because of like that bigger amount of understanding, we basically bring a corporate event understanding to a very juvenile business of hosting parties. And so we kind of just automatically get lumped into the same group as some of these other companies and groups that have gotten a lot of flack for hosting these types of events during the pandemic, where it's like we haven't even had a chance to show off what we can actually do to follow these guidelines.
Yeah.
And it's been very, very unfair, I think, for them to not even give us a chance to give it a shot. But what ends up happening is there are public officials, elected and appointed, and there are also members of the media that hold all of the cards. So what we've seen, I've canceled 15 events. 7 of them have been corporate events where the company's just like, oh, we our investors or the public doesn't think we should be doing events right now, so we're just going to cancel the event altogether. They didn't like cancel us and go to somebody else. They just completely canceled the event. So that was 7 of them. But then the rest, the other 8 were like promoted events. They're events that we promote, and a lot of them have been, the venue has caved because of the pressure given to them by either the health department, the governor's office.
Because you're not a venue.
No,
you go somewhere and host it.
Exactly, and the risk is too big. Let's say a venue is trying to build like an extension to their building. Okay, and this has happened, and they need the county or they need the city to be on their side. So they just send a little email. Hey, we would really encourage you not to host this event. It would be in your best interest to not host this event. That kind of stuff has happened. I've seen it happen several times. Now, there's also the public who have been sucked into the fear that the media has created. And I would say that these people, most of them are genuine. Most of them, they're just scared. They're not bad people. They're scared. My family is in that group. They're not bad people at all. They're just scared. They're terrified because the media sensationalizes everything. Because it's like, you see a news report and it says like, COVID-19 mostly doesn't kill people in this age range. Okay, that headline's boring. Like, why would I read something that doesn't kill people? Why would I read about that? No, seriously though. So they give it the spin that makes it sound as worse as it possibly can sound, because then they get more views, they get more visits, they get more ad spend money, and it causes people to be fearful. And therefore, when they see an event like this happen, or at least even get promoted, everyone just loses their minds. Even though people are touching all these shopping carts at shopping centers and gym equipment at the gyms and opening doors that aren't getting not getting sanitized regularly, but they don't think anything of that. It's just fear mongering.
Here's the tough part about this is the enforcement, right? Because it's not really illegal. And so what you just said was interesting about kind of the little blackmail between these counties or cities, permits and this type of thing. Because the problem is this can't be shut down. So here you are, you're marketing this event. You're not making it totally clear who the organizers are or who it is. This is, the reporters are trying to see, well, this is a new business and this Instagram page was just there and we're trying to reach out and no one's commenting back. But actually they say in the article that enforcement is dependent upon specific circumstances, such as if an establishment has already had a violation or not. It's also possible an event like this will not violate any public or health order if the overseer effectively implements the state required precautions. We don't know enough yet to know. This is Nicholas Ruff of the Salt Lake County Health Department, basically being a spokesperson here. Yeah. So the question that the news is asking is, well, are you going to shut this thing down? By the way, the other interesting thing you guys did is you didn't announce the location of the party. So you say, hey, buy tickets. This party's going to be hosted within a 30-minute drive from Salt Lake or Provo. Yeah. Check the social page the night of. So there was nothing they could do to preempt. Mm-hmm. Tell me about now this enforcement question.
Yeah, so this is huge. Going back to that other group I was talking about earlier, they had an event that got shut down real quick. And they were technically following the COVID requirements for Provo City, but they still got shut down for not having properly lit emergency exit signs. So the reason I bring that up, they'll find something. It doesn't matter. They'll find something. They'll come in. They'll send in the engineer. They'll send in the fire department, and and this happened to us before. We brought Lil John to Provo. And the entire city, I'm almost certain they sat in a room, and the mayor,
the Lil Jon,
yeah,
okay, that guy.
So I'm almost certain they sat in a room and they said, on our watch, this guy's not coming to Provo, Utah. And so I saw arrows getting shot at us from the police department, from the fire department, from city administration, and they tried everything they could. But what we ended up doing was we just knew the rules, all the rules, we knew the laws. All the laws so well that they threw everything they could at us. They couldn't end up canceling it. The event went off well, and it caused us to have a really good relationship with the city. So it was kind of cool. But they will come at you from different angles. So the enforcement, it doesn't matter. When you control the narrative, when you write your stories with ink from unlimited barrels of ink, and when you have taxpayer dollars on your side, it doesn't matter where the enforcement comes. It doesn't matter if they have the constitutional authority. They will find a way. And that's what I've learned. And whether it's giving pressure to the venue or whether it's tipping off the fire department and convincing them that there's some kind of violation there, even if there isn't, they'll come, they'll find something else, they'll get you. That's just how it's going to be. And that's where it's really sad is it's discouraging because here I am doing a protest that's completely legal and actually following all their stupid guidelines, which I do not think are necessarily saving many lives. Mm-hmm. And yet it still gets to the point where we have to pull the plug. And it's kind of unfortunate, even if we jump through all their hoops. It's like, why make the damn hoops in the first place if you can't jump through them?
So we haven't said this yet, but you pulled the plug today. It's Monday night. It's October 26th, 27th. This party was supposed to be Saturday night on Halloween. It was all a go, and literally you texted me. We were planning on doing this interview with you being a mentor of this group and then kind of marketing the party a little bit too. You text me as you're on your way over here that it's off.
Yep.
Why?
Literally 30 minutes ago. Yeah. Well, so in this particular instance, the venue and it's funny because I've been through this before. So we talked to the venue. We said, you're going to get a lot of calls. You're going to get a lot of hate. You're going to get a lot of pressure. Yeah. Are you still good with proceeding with this? Like, oh, we're totally good with it. We think what you're doing is great. We're on board. And we said, okay, even to insulate that even more, because we know that the pressure is going to be much larger than you're thinking it is, we're not even going to announce where it's at. Well, somehow it leaked. Uh-huh. Somehow somebody reached out to them, either from the health department or from the county, probably the county commissioners, which they're the most hypocritical people.
Can you say, was it Salt Lake or Utah?
Utah County, yeah.
Okay.
And so I got an email from them basically saying, hey, we're so sad about this, but like we have project X, Y, and Z that we got to do in 2021. And we don't think they're going to let us do it if we have this event. And I was only paying them $2,000 for the venue. So I threw a Hail Mary at them. I was like, okay, well, ticket sales are looking similar to my New Year's Eve event, which
kills it.
Grossed about $100,000.
Okay.
Right. And I was like, I'll split it 50-50. Our expenses for New Year's is like $30,000, right? Yeah. Our expenses for this was $8,000. So if we would have bought $100,000 on $8,000 of expenses, minus $2,000 for the vet, so really $6,000. I mean, I would have been splitting like $94,000 with them 50-50. That was my Hail Mary, and they said they couldn't do it. They got reached out to, they got blackmailed in some way, they got scared, and they backed out. So I had backup venues, but the problem is the best backup venue I had was all the way down in Cedar City, and the neighbors were too close. Yeah. Like sound would have been an issue, capacity was an issue, distance was an issue. Yeah. I'm scared of letting people drive home that late too, if they don't get an Airbnb or whatever. So,
and Halloween is the time for parties.
It really is.
And nothing's happening.
It's
like this was going to be, this party would have been crazy too because everyone was going to go. There were no other options.
Honestly, it was, so the ticket sale data was actually better than my most profitable event, but I kind of was, I like to be a little more skeptical,
sure,
more of a realist with the numbers. But like if I followed the same trend, we would have had probably about 8,000 people at that event, which is, we still could have followed the guidelines because the guidelines no longer.
It was outdoor.
Yeah, it was outdoor, and it no longer has a restriction on the number of people, as long as you have masks and you have enough space to socially distance, and you post about it.
I mean, we're all watching the World Series, and there's that many people in the stands.
Yeah, and they're spread out,
sitting vertically. Because I did see the meme that everyone knows that COVID doesn't.
It only
spread
goes
horizontally, right?
It only goes one way. That's the thing.
Heard that if you've seen the stadiums where they're all lined up in these vertical lines, the joke is that everyone knows COVID only spreads horizontally.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad you brought that up because one of my biggest pet peeves with this whole thing is, like, it's cool to be crazy. It's cool to be super, super obsessively scared of this thing. I get that. But like, be consistently crazy. Stop being so inconsistent about it. I'm serious. Like, these people,
don't tell that to a crazy person.
I know.
They can't do it. They're crazy.
I know. It's nuts because it's like the inconsistencies blow my mind. Like, I was at this social gathering where everybody said, hey, let's all bring our own takeout so we don't have to deal with like sharing, utensils. We don't have to like get near each other, and we don't have to, no one's cooking and everything else. And I'm like, okay, that's all right, whatever. So I show up with my own takeout. We're all sitting 6 feet apart, right? This is earlier on. And then one of the people pulls out a Ziploc baggie full of fun-sized Snickers bars. Like, does anybody want one? And everybody's like, oh, I'll take one. And they're just grabbing it with their hands, tossing it to them, back and forth. Everybody's grabbing these Snickers that were just in the hands of one of these people, right? And I'm like, isn't that the whole point of us bringing the takeout, was so that we wouldn't touch the same things that other people touched? But you just completely defeated that. You used your hands to open this thing up, your dirty hands, that somebody else was just touching this wrapper, and you just stuck it in your mouth. Like, inconsistently crazy. That's what drives me nuts.
I talk history a lot on this podcast, and I like to tie current issues to the past. And so as I thought about this with you, something that kept coming to mind, and I just want to talk about this quickly. We won't go into the whole thing, but I'm like, okay, this guy's hosting a party that's a protest, and it's a costume party. And immediately I had this thought of the Boston Tea Party. For those of you that know much about the Boston Tea Party, give me just a little second and I'll set the stage here. So I actually, at the start of the episode, I played, the song, Oh, What a Night, Late December back in 63. Well, here's how you're going to remember it. Late December back in 1773, all right? December 16th. Basically, you had the colonists that are living under British rule across an entire ocean. And their big problem is that they keep getting taxed on things, but they can't vote for members of parliament, right? Like, that's the basis start of the American Revolution. You've got the Stamp Act, where basically every piece of paper, whether it was official or not, had this heavy tax on it. And then the Townshend Acts, which basically taxed all sorts of things within the colonies, and the main thing is tea. And with that, what's interesting is the British's argument for why this was justified is that they were keeping them safe. Mm-hmm. They were protecting them. Mm-hmm. Let me explain why. So in the French and Indian War, basically the British footed the bill for that.
Expensive. Yeah,
so their argument was, hey, look, we've gone into all this debt to pay for the colonies, to make sure you stay safe. It's in this guise of protection. So now we're going to start these taxes, which a lot of the colonists basically say this is unjust. The Sons of Liberty start, and here's what's interesting. The Sons of Liberty could be looked at two ways. They're either a group of drunk ruffians that are hanging out at the local tavern in Boston, riling each other up and getting pissed about this tyrannical government. Or they're founding fathers.
American heroes
that stood up for what was right. I mean, the list of the founding fathers who ran it was Sam Adams. Second, James Otis, who gives us the famous quote, taxation without representation is tyranny.
Yep.
Paul Revere, John Hancock. And these men led that. I mean, do you see anything like that happening today?
Oh, of course. I think there are so many parallels you can make. And one thing that it kind of makes me think of is those who make change and make big impacts in history, they're not like necessarily these superheroes that you would see in a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
You know, they're regular people with a passion and a drive and a desire and a will to proceed in a way that they feel in their heart is right. And I think that we look at things so black and white all the time, and it's not like everything they did was like the right thing at the time, but in reality, what came of it was something that was quite magical. And it ended up being very good for so many people for so many generations.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the norm, you know, people, they like the status quo. You know, that's why, and we'll see what happens on November 3rd, but that's why, like, a president's usually going to get reelected for their second term because it's what they know. They're comfortable with it. Yeah. They've seen it. They have it. And so now that we've got, like, this mask thing going on for so long for our safety, it's, like, becoming the status quo. When last year, if someone were to say, hey, everybody's got to wear masks during flu season, like, no one would believe it, but we've been conditioned to go down this road. And I think the people back then too were kind of conditioned to accept those tyrannical requirements through taxation on the British.
And they weren't popular in 1770.
No, there were a lot of loyalists.
I mean, like, there are people in America that are saying, like, no, Britain protects us. That's where my family is. Like, I'm only a generation removed. We don't want to go that route. And what's interesting, so Sam Adams in that morning basically riles everyone up and says, like, we're done with this. They're taxing us. This is unfair. These ships come to bring tea into the harbor, in Boston Harbor, that's going to be taxed like crazy. And they basically say, we're going to go destroy it tonight.
Which is radical. That's
and it's
a radical
totally
thing.
Illegal.
Yeah.
It's radical, but it's totally illegal. They go, a group of the Sons of Liberty, they actually dress up as Native Americans. So here's where the costume party is. They actually painted their face with charcoal. So, like, when this was the first time you saw, like, blackface in America in a big event like this. They get on the ships. They destroy about $1 million worth of tea in U.S. dollars today. And they just did it to prove a point.
Yeah.
They did it to get the King of England's attention, and it worked.
Yep.
They were pissed. And then immediately after that, Britain responds with even harsher laws, even harsher things that just continue to move us closer and closer to revolution.
Yeah, but exactly. Here's what happened, though. So when the harsh response came from the British, it added so much more fuel to the response back from the Americans. Yeah. Because it was becoming more overbearing. And so I'm seeing that today. I mean, this last event that I just pulled the plug on, I mean, my phone's just been blowing up. I had to turn it off because it was buzzing like crazy with all these people sending messages and commenting about how frustrated they are with this, how ridiculous this is, and how it's gone too far. And I think that, honestly, we're on the verge of starting an actual, like, movement that is in, like, the majority. Yeah. I think early on when people were hosting, like, these open everything up protests when we're like a month or 2 months into the pandemic and there were still a lot of unknowns about the pandemic and everything else, I think they were looked at as more radical. Now, I think we're still looked at as more radical right now, but the needle is moving, and it's moving fast.
This is fascinating to me. Now, I stay pretty neutral in this. I don't want you getting this, the listeners at home all of a sudden thinking that I'm comparing you not wearing a mask to being Sam Adams. Like, give me liberty or give me death. I'm throwing that mask away. Like, of course, we don't need to swing to that extreme. But I do want to point out that often revolutionaries, and I'll use air quotes for that, are unpopular in the time period they live in. I read recently, I'm reading this book right now about Abraham Lincoln. It's incredible. It's called Every Drop of Blood. And it blows my mind of how disliked that guy was in his time by the South, of course, by the opposing Democrats, and more importantly, by his own party. Yeah. Like, they hated the guy. And now we look at Abraham Lincoln 150 years later, and it's like, oh, he's the best president. There he is on Mount Rushmore. Yep. But that guy had a really, really tough life, which, by the way, ended with him being assassinated.
I know. And how many times did he run for office and fail before he even got one position? Yeah. It was, I don't know how many, but it was insane. It was insane.
I think this is really important for us, just as Americans. You've used the word wake up a little bit, right? You could take that to mean a lot of things, but to me, like, waking up means simply think. Don't be told. Don't be dictated. I say this all the time. People ask me, Connor, what news sources do you read? And I think we get into such a habit of we are used to watching or reading commentary on commentary.
Yep.
Here's what I'm saying about what that person did, about what that person said.
Yep.
And the truth gets lost. And as much as we can, just really dive down to what's the core of the issue? What can we do as an upstanding citizen, but then always making sure that we're keeping our freedoms in check.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to the question of what is the role of government, right? And I mean, we've seen, if anybody that's studied history understands or should understand that people like power. When they're given power, they seek for more power. Whether they're doing something that in their hearts they think is right or not, they don't usually give up that power. And so whether it's an increase in taxes, whether it's a mandate, whether it's some kind of regulation or restriction, that, if you look at it for what it is a true increase of power for somebody who is over somebody else. And it's a one-way street. And what happens in civilizations, when civilizations fall apart, more often than not, the people in control have gathered up power piece by piece, bit by bit over the years until it turns to bloodshed. And it sounds super radical, but like what we've seen here in our country, where taxes go up, they don't usually go down. It's very rare when they go down, and regulations and restrictions and laws and all kinds of different requirements, they become more constrictive, and it's more difficult for us to live our lives. So, generally speaking, it's like, yeah, I want to save lives. I really do. I want people to wear masks when they're around the high at risk individuals. I really do. But is it really government's role to step in and require those things? And I tend to lean on the side of saying, no, it isn't. I think it's our individual responsibility to have common sense and decency for each other.
I think that's so well put. The listeners obviously know, I brought you on not just as this guy that hosts this event. Like, I know you're very politically active, you're educated, and you just happen to have this crossroads of being an event planner in this time. I think for me, what's very interesting is what you just said right there. I have been very adamant over the last 6 months that coronavirus isn't a voting issue, that it shouldn't be a part of this election because it's all coulda, woulda, shoulda. Mm-hmm. There's no way to tell how it's been handled. Yeah, exactly. But to be honest, that changed for me at the last debate, because when the first 15 minutes of that was Donald Trump and Joe Biden talking about how we handle coronavirus moving forward, to me, what I heard is a debate about what you just said. Mm. How much power is it okay to give to the government? And I see this battle between really the difference of platforms of the Republican and Democrat Party right now are small government, let the people and let the states decide, or big government, national mandates. Mm. I'm not going to say what side is right on that, but that's the argument that we're facing. And unfortunately, like what we're talking about today is on the ballot.
Yeah.
In 2020.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, you look at the government and it's like, they're inefficient. They're incompetent. They're just a big toddler that's just stomping around the room that's falling over and messing everything up, because it's like, look at the post office. Yeah. Like, they can't run a profitable business for the life of them. The private industry gets it right with UPS, with FedEx. There are so many different areas where the government just falls flat on their face, while in the private sector, they do a good job. And so I just don't get why people always look at our politicians and all of our senators and they're like, oh, they're the worst people in the world. They're this or this or that, which I tend to agree with a lot of times. But then they would just want to give them more power and more control. What in that is the most pointless lunacy I've ever heard. Yeah. Take some power away. So if somebody isn't the smartest person, they're running for office, and they want to give power back to the individual, to the family, to the community, the local community, I want them in, because that right there is freedom. That's exactly what America stands for. And I think that the more power we give, and even if there's a really good leader in place at the time, and we allow them to have, we lean more towards socialism, and they control more of the monies, and they have a little bit more, say on what people can and can't do. And then the next time around, somebody comes in who's incompetent, but guess what? They still have all that power. Then what do we do? And that right there is I think, a very scary thing. So even whatever you say about Donald Trump, how crazy he is and how rude he is and how like not tactful he is and what he says and what he does, well, the fact is he's given more freedoms back to people. and he's lessening restrictions, and he's lowering, in most cases, lowering government's role in individuals' lives. And I don't care if you have an IQ of 5. If you do that, I want you in office.
Yeah.
So
here's what's interesting. What you just said right there sounds a whole lot like Sam Adams on the morning of December 16th, 1773. He got the group riled up talking about government rights and how the people come into play there and fighting for your liberty, and those times where you have to say, I'm going to step up. I don't know if this is one of those times. I don't know if this type of 2020 will be remembered in the same way that we remember and celebrate the Boston Tea Party now. And, you can go to Boston today and go throw a stupid box off the, replica ship tied to a rope and bring it back in to celebrate that moment. But I think anytime we are awakened to that situation and we fight for each other and we fight for liberty, that's a cause I can get behind. Erik, I'm sorry about your event. I know countless hours were put into that. It's fresh. And I really appreciate you coming and doing this conversation when it's raw. And you could have very easily said no to this tonight. Thank you. I wish you a lot of success in the future. And hopefully that sense of normalcy, who knows what that means or when that will happen, we get there soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Connor. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I end every episode the same way. Clowns to the left me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. He did it. Barely. Right. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you next time.